but they sent her home with a prescription. And what happened is we were, not smart. We listened to our doctors, some of these phrases that you hear, and it was a safe and effective medicine. And so she took a pill after we filled the prescription, and she wasn't feeling quite right. She took the second dose, and she was really not doing good. And she called the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, you started the course, just finish it." And she took the third pill, and she started convulsing so bad the bed started shaking. Turns out what they had prescribed her for basically a head cold. A little bit of a throat infection, a summer cold. I know it was a summer cold because I got the same thing the next day and was over it in 24 hours. They prescribed her one of the most powerful antibiotics that's on the market.
This is the Farm Hop Life podcast. I'm Matt DeRocher. Today, my guest is Matt Sorrell of formerly Quarter Acres Farm, now Freebird Homestead. He and his wife moved from New York City and now have a quarter acre just outside of the cities there. Pretty interesting story that he's got, and I'm curious to hear the whole thing. So, Matt, how you doing today?
I hope you got some time if you want to hear the whole thing.
I got plenty of time.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. And, I've watched a couple of your other episodes. Of course, some of the mutuals that I have, Jeffrey and Lauren, and you had Josiah on the last week. And you contacted me. And if you remember, my first response was, well, I'm not actually a real farmer, right? Those other people you've had on, they're doing some great things. They're like legit homestead people. They're ranchers, they're farmers. They got all kinds of operations going on. And I'm just a guy with a garden and a few backyard chickens. But it might be a little bit interesting. It's a little bit different from some of these other people that you maybe had on. And like you were saying, my wife and I, we moved up from New York City. So how did we get from climbing the corporate ladder at our jobs down in the city to this morning, I'm chasing a chicken around my backyard trying to catch it and see if it's got a foot infection, right? So how did that happen? And, to be clear about things, it's not like we moved to a log cabin in Montana or anything like that. We very much live in an urban environment. It's a small city. I could walk out my front door, I could walk to a station, and I could be on an express train to Grand Central in just a little over an hour. So we're kind of doing some things that might be a little bit atypical for the, urban, small city, suburban environment that we live in. And I think one of the things we can talk about is that you don't necessarily have to move to a log cabin in Montana to do some things. There are maybe some small things, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, that you can do on your own.
That's why I thought your story, just a little bit that I knew about, was interesting. Because I have here in my notes that your wife is from the Bronx, and when you guys got married, you had a gorgeous apartment in a trendy neighborhood in Queens.
Yeah, so that is all true.
So let's take me through that. Like, what happened there? What happened?
The short story is my wife caught a cold, but a little bit more detail of that. And as you mentioned, we were both working we're both engineers. We were both working for a large engineering firm at the time. I think it was either the first or the second largest engineering firm in the world. We were working in their New York City office together, and we'd been married just over a year, just shy of actually just past our first anniversary. We had just moved to this beautiful apartment. It had a terrace. So we were, everybody came over for the barbecues because we were the only people who could even have a barbecue. We had a terrace in New York City. And we had not just a one bedroom, it was a 2-bedroom, which of course we were designating as the nursery someday. So what happened then, and again, so my wife and I, we traveled all the time. That was our thing. We're not into stuff or anything like that. Some people get purses. I had a flip phone. I was the last guy in America, I'm sure, to get a smartphone, right? But what we did is we traveled a lot, and that was really our thing. And we had visited England and France earlier that year, and at the time, my wife was out of vacation. People who probably have corporate type jobs are probably familiar with PTO, how they combine vacation and sick time into one big block of time. That's PTO. And when you're in your 20s or early 30s, nobody takes a sick day because you're just cut into your own vacation time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is it was late August. It was one of those beautiful late August days in New York City. It was about 95 degrees, 98% humidity. I mean, you could just like smell the garbage frying on the sidewalk. One of those days, if you can picture it.
Gross.
And my wife, she wasn't feeling good. And, I was like, well, calling to work today, don't go in if you're not feeling good. Take a day off. And this is 12 years ago. This is before any of the stuff that we're dealing with now happened, right? If you're sick, stay home. So we're old pros at that. But what had happened is because we had just taken this trip, she was out of PTO. She only had 1 day left, actually. And she was getting ready to sit for her professional engineering licensing exam. And we had planned a little getaway up in the Adirondack Mountains. So she needed that day of PTO, or else she wasn't going to be able to go on her vacation. And then she wanted to go there. We were going to go there for the weekend. She was going to come back, buckle down, and then start studying for her exam, which was coming up in 6 weeks or so. And she was like, well, I don't want to burn a day, but I'll take the day unpaid. All right, that's fine. So she calls the boss, and whatever reason, that was not going to look good for the quarterly numbers, or she had important TPS reports or something like that to fill out. And so he's like, no, you got to come in. So she, was running a minor temp, maybe about 100 or so, and this absolutely awful day, drags herself into work. And she was dehydrated, sick, what have you. And she ended up collapsing at work.
Oh, my gosh.
And they, ambulance comes to drag her out in an ambulance on a gurney, bring her to the hospital and all this and that and the other thing. And, that really kind of should have been the end of it. They did all kinds of tests and this and that. And, can't find anything wrong with you. Just, dehydrated. They gave her an IV. And it should have been away you go, right? They did send her, away we go. But they sent her home with a prescription. And what happened is we were, not smart. We listened to our doctors, some of these phrases that you hear, and it was a safe and effective medicine. And so she took a pill after we filled the prescription, and, she wasn't feeling quite right. She took the second dose, and she was really not doing good. And she called the doctor. And the doctor said, well, you started the course, just finish it. And she took the third pill, and she started convulsing so bad the bed started shaking. Turns out what they had prescribed her for basically a head cold, a little bit of a throat infection, a summer cold. I know it was a summer cold because I got the same thing the next day and was over it in 24 hours. They prescribed her one of the most powerful antibiotics that's on the market. And, we didn't know. And, these things are typically, they're prescribed for things like anthrax is what they're used for.
Holy crap.
And it knocked her out. And then come to find out, this was in 2012, 2016, the FDA, which had previously said this is safe and effective, now comes out and says, yeah, after doing a little more research, the risk of using this drug outweighs the benefit. It shouldn't be really prescribed unless it's a life or death situation. So now we do our own research is another phrase that you might hear a lot going around these days. Mm-hmm. But be that as it may, she was completely disabled from 3 legally prescribed pills. And so it just floored her. The official terminology that the FDA uses is fluoroquinolone-associated disability. Survivors call it fluoroquinolone toxicity. We prefer to just call it poisoning because that's what it is. Sure. And if you look at her list of symptoms, it very much aligns with the symptoms you might see for other severe acute poisonings. One of the ones, if you type in her symptoms, into what is it, WebMD or something like that, comes back Gulf War syndrome. A lot of these other diseases that you hear about that are all diseases functionally of toxicity, they all have the same root. The body was poisoned, an acute poisoning. And we've come to learn it doesn't really matter if it's a pharmaceutical injury, if it's you go lick a puddle of mercury, if you're attacked with nerve gas, if you eat a chicken salad sandwich that's been sitting in the sun for 2 hours. It's all the same. It's all poisoning. It's all toxic to your body. And so in her process of healing, she's still in the process of it 12 years later, we really became very much aware of this concept of toxicity. And she was the victim of an acute poisoning, but we're chronically being poisoned all the time, be it in our food, our air, our water, or the three main avenues. And so we really became very adamant about trying to minimize as much as we can. Now, someone like you or I who hasn't experienced an acute poisoning, we can maybe sustain ourselves a little bit better in some of these low dose atmospheres. I mean, I think you probably heard the saying, the dose is what makes the poison. We can maybe tolerate those low doses because we have stronger constitutions. However, if you're in the process of recovering from an acute toxicity, these low doses, it's like a constantly ripping that scab off the wound. And so kind of going on here a little bit, we realized that we had to make some changes if she had any chance of healing. And, slowly the dots started to connect together. The apartment that we lived in, that beautiful apartment, we rented it from a really nice Greek family. And it was actually the people who lived in the apartment before us were the parents, of the family. And, a few months before we moved in, the mother had died of a rare form of lung cancer. And a few months after that, the father died of the same rare form of lung cancer. The sister lived in the building next door. She had a lot of very chronic illness, a lot of symptoms. She always had a lot of, fatigue and things like that. The tenants downstairs from us, when we first moved in, the woman, she was very, very sensitive, light or noise or sound or anything like that. These dots started to get connected. That beautiful terrace we had, you looked across the street, there was an auto body shop. And the spray booth vented directly into that sliding glass door we had.
Wow.
So we were breathing in the byproducts of it. It was basically like living in a spray paint booth. And when you're in an environment like Queens, like New York City, you don't notice these things because there's just this constant smog around you. So we decided that we needed to get out. I was fortunate. I was able to transfer my job upstate, and we got her out of that environment. And it took us some doing. It took us almost 3 years. But we eventually found the house that we're in now. And, we look for things like a house with a large side yard to keep people away from us. And it's things that you might not notice, like dryer sheets can really wreak havoc on somebody who's trying to recover from these things. We did our homework now. We would put in an offer on the house, and we looked, or actually we never put an offer on this one. We didn't put an offer because we were going to. And we drove around the neighborhood and we saw some cars up on blocks in the house that was behind it. Did a little digging, and it turns out the guys were mechanics. They worked at a garage, 9 to 5. And then on the weekends, they did some work on the side. So, we're not going to live next door to mechanics if she's going to heal, right? So this house is off the list. But it was a big challenge for us to find housing. We can talk a little bit more about this later. But anyway, that got us where we are now. And one of the first things we did when we had our own plot of land was plant a garden. It is so critical for her to get good, healthy, organic food. That was one of the top priorities we had. And of course, there's so much more options, so many more options out there available to everybody these days. But at the time, it was kind of hard to find organic food. And some of the stuff, frankly, is greenwashed a little bit. And, people are saying it's organic, or this chicken's free range, or it's this or that. And it's really not. If you look into what the USDA criteria are to label as such. So we wanted a lot more control over our food source. We wanted control over our water supply. We wanted, we're still on city water, of course, but we wanted to be able to install water filters and have control over that. We wanted control over the airspace around us. We tried to not do things, spray paint. We don't, obviously smoking or anything like that. She has a lot of mold allergies and stuff like that. So that was part of the difficulty of finding a house was, she can't move into a new build because all the byproducts of the construction materials greatly affect her. Old houses, mold is ubiquitous. So it was really, what do you do here? We finally found this old house. It's 100-year-old, and it was relatively mold-free, and I was able to abate it. And now this is like, this is her safe haven. So this is something that we've really have put a lot of work into restoring this house so that it's a safe place for her. And I know I'm kind of going a little bit here, but what it really gets into us and where we became really passionate about this too is we look at how difficult it was for her to find housing, how difficult it was for her to find clean air, clean food, clean water. In this journey, we've met thousands of other people who were poisoned by these same drugs. And it doesn't even have to be this specific drug. The one that did it to her was a fluoroquinolone antibiotic. Avalox is the brand name. But there are so many other people. You look at the chronic illness rates in this country. There are so many people living with chronic illness. And, we were very blessed. We did have the means to eventually get out of that spray paint booth environment and get our own place. But there's a lot of people who can't. And so that's really kind of inspired us to get on this thing and that's kind of where the Freebird came from.
I thought you were just a Skynyrd fan.
Well, it's a great song anyway, even if you don't get the reference. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. But, we have a good friend who suffers from a lot of the same things, but she has a mold-infested house that she doesn't have the means to move out of. We have another good friend who's similar symptoms, but it's, she lives on the second floor of an apartment and can't get out. Right. And so, we're trying to tie all these things together. Like, how can we come up with a way to get housing for these people or create a community of small houses on a plot of land where people could go to heal and where they can have access to good food, access to clean water, access to clean air. And, that's kind of our dream. We're not there yet. Right now, we're still working on just healing ourselves and learning some skills. But eventually that's where we would like to go with it. We are actively looking at getting some bigger plots of land, maybe not a big plot in Montana, but, we've looked at some smaller, 5 to 10 acre sized parcels. And maybe someday we would like to build some sort of community. And we're using this as the opportunity to kind of develop these skills that we might be to someday use, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Use. And I asked you if you had some time because it was a little bit of a long answer to your question.
I was completely sucked in that whole time. I was like, oh, look at the time. We're already 15 minutes in. This is great. But that's a crazy story. If you don't mind me asking, what's your wife's condition currently? How should
there's good days and bad days. We don't like to look at the symptoms. We always look at it from the standpoint of that she has survived she survived. And, a lot of people don't. A lot of people live with these symptoms and take their own lives, unfortunately. We've known 2 in the past year. Wow. It's a horrific condition to live with. But she has good days and bad days. There's days when, we're able to go for a walk in the park together and she's able to maybe get some of her own food. There's days still 12 years later where she can't get out of bed and needs assistance to the bathroom. I mean, this was a woman who traveled to China, to Turkey, to Mexico by herself when she was in her early 20s. Graduated at or near the top of her class in engineering school. And there's days when she needs help doing even basic things. We do think that trend is going northeast. We think she's healing. There's good days and bad days, though.
Did you say that she's paralyzed or?
No, she's not paralyzed. No. She did have a lot of neurological symptoms. She had convulsions a lot frequently.
Okay,
And
I thought I heard like
no
paralysis or something. So
no convulsing sometimes.
I gotcha. Okay,
And even as recent as last week, she had some convulsions actually, but they're getting less frequent and further between.
good.
But again, that's kind of what's gotten us all. Had nothing else happened, that's what pushed us towards looking into these things. Now let's go to 2020, right? President's Day 2020. Life is normal, life as usual, right? St. Patrick's Day, my office was now my kitchen table where I'm sitting right now, and you had to make an appointment to go to a grocery store, and we saw how fast things change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see the uncertainty in the world. Who knows what's going to come with some of these situations with supply chains and things of that nature. So the other motivating factor for us was, listen, we have no pretense that we're ever going to be self-sufficient, right? Living where we do. We are very much on grid, but we can be more resilient.
Sure.
We can, I don't know if we grow or raise 10% of our calories, but we've started, and we've learned some things along the way. And if something catastrophic did happen, probably even more important than what we have, we've overcome inertia. We've started to think about some of these things and maybe take some concrete actions towards how can we shore ourselves up? How can we be, a resilient member of a community where supply chains to completely collapse, where there to be a second wave or a third wave, whatever wave we're up to now of a pandemic, or things of that nature. So once these things started happening, we started seeing, some of these skills that we're trying to learn, trying to develop, we might need to accelerate that a little bit and really get up our game, because we don't know what's going to happen. We saw how fast things can change.
Absolutely. So this journey started for you 12 years ago, you said?
12 years.
Yes. That's when everything kicked off, and so right. You've been working on your skills, growing food in your garden, having chickens.
Yep.
What else do you have right now?
Right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fruit trees. We have 7 chickens, which is probably sounds like nothing to some actual farmers, but when you're living in a small plot like we are, 7 chickens running around the backyard is quite a bit.
Sure.
We have our garden, vegetable garden. We put up a greenhouse last summer, and we were able to grow almost all the way through a New York winter, which I was pretty happy with. And we just started, our latest thing now is mushrooms. We just inoculated rather some logs with reishi mushrooms for a lot of medicinal teas. And, kind of like what I was talking about, the resiliency. Mm-hmm. If diesel goes through the roof or people stop driving truck, a lot of these reishi mushrooms, where are you going to get them from, right? Mm-hmm. And they're kind of a key, lion's mane mushrooms too. We've started those, and they're kind of a key aspect of my wife's regimen too. She makes a lot of teas for herself, and I do help her quite a bit. So we kind of got it in our head. Well, let's start making lists of these things that we think we're going to need, and maybe start working on providing for ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then it's another skill. Hey, I can.
It's another skill, mushrooms. Right? And it's just
very smart.
It's one thing you can cross off the list. And again, we are not off grid by any chance. Even close to it. But it's one thing we don't have to worry about. If I can get that spawn to take on that log, all right, we don't have to worry about that. That problem's solved. And you can focus energy to something else.
Right. I saw in your bio that you were a Marine.
Yes.
Right. How did your time in the military, has that contributed to the homesteading in any way, like resiliency or being able to adapt or problem solve or anything like that?
I wouldn't say it directly related at all, but some of the mindset does.
Sure.
Um, and like you said, one of the phrases where I said adapt, improvise, overcome,
Mm-hmm.
or trying to strategically think, a little bit into the future. I mean, something as stupid as mushrooms. Well, what's something we might miss? Oh, we can take care of that. Let's start now. It's like that old saying. What's that old saying? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, well, it's not 20 years ago, but a few weeks ago we started our mushroom culture. So, we're trying to think in that way, think strategically. So I think that would be the main way military style of thinking has influenced my thinking today. And something, it might sound kind of stupid. I wear my dog tags still. You've been out 25 years. What are you, an idiot? You're still wear your dog tags. I never wore them when I got out. I'd throw them on like the 4th of July or Memorial Day or something like that, just as a remembrance or Veterans Day. But then they went back in the closet or back in the top drawer, wherever I had them. And it was Memorial Day 2020. I did put them on just as my normal kind of custom. And I started thinking, you might need to start thinking that way again. Start thinking, ahead a little bit into the future. Because again, think back to Memorial Day 2020. This was the peak of the pandemic. There was all kinds of unrest in the street. Nobody knew what was going to happen tomorrow. And again, I've kept them on since, more or less. Not mostly just to remind myself. I hate to use the term, but it's like you kind of got to have this mentality of planning ahead. What can you do to protect your safety, or your family's safety, or your livelihood?
That's interesting.
And it serves as a reminder to me.
I like that. That's pretty cool. I like that. What like practices or techniques or methods do you have going on your property? Like, do you have like any raised beds or swales, or do you have your chickens go into your garden prior to planting anything to till them up and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, we do raised bed. I mean, as you probably gathered, we are organic. We don't use any pesticide or chemical fertilizer or anything like that. So anything we do use, we have compost bins, and we're always good about turning the compost over and trying to keep a ready supply on that to keep our soils healthy. We do use raised beds. Again, I think that's just the most practical method for the environment that we're in. We do have good soil in this area. I mean, it's a very fertile area of the country, but just again, due to the topography of the backyard, raised beds are really the way to go for us. That was one of the reasons for the chickens too, kind of threefold. One, we live in an area where there's a lot of tick-borne disease, and so we'll take care of that. Again, without the use of chemical pesticides or anything of that, there's a natural predator, and we've never seen a tick in our backyard, even though we're right in the ground zero for a lot of these tick-borne illnesses.
Sure.
I'll go out tomorrow. I'll find 50 of them, but it'll I just said that. But it was, the other thing too is they are good in the garden, and particularly the manure, and it's a key component of our composting mechanism, using the chicken manure. And this time of year, I do let them in the garden. They're very, very happy about that, and they have dug the entire thing up, made quite a mess. They're going to be very sad when I close that garden gate in a few more weeks, but they're going to be so used to going in there, but they're going to get chased out of there pretty soon if I catch them in there. So, we do use them for that too. And this year, and it's like these things, you kind of get bit by a bug a little bit too. And it's like each year you feel like you got to do one more thing. And so my thing this year is we always looked at, well, vegetables go in the garden, right? That's the garden. That's where everything is, and it kind of hit me last fall. Doesn't have to be, right? You've got a lawn. You could do a lot more with that. And I was actually raking leaves last fall, and I looked around, and like most houses in the yard, I've got a chain link fence all the way around the yard. And I always just looked at it as chain link fence, and it just kind of clicked for me. That's a trellis, And so I think that's going to be the thing this year. Is it'll be really my first attempt at doing something that's not in a raised bed. It would be more kind of I guess call it like a no-till type, planting some seedlings on that, along that fence, something that's more of a climbing, more of a vine type, whether it's like a cucumbers or squashes or even like sweet potato vines or something like that. See if I can get them trained along that chain link fence. I pretty sure, and fortuitously, a neighbor chopped down a huge tree, so we've got a whole bunch more sun in our yard right now. So I do think I'm going to have good success with that. The key thing for me is going to be keeping my fine feathered, free ranging friends away from anything I plant. So I'm going to have to put some netting or some fences up. So I'm going to have to get to work on that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. My wife and I just last night were going through all our seeds, and we're like, okay, we've got all this different corn, and we have all these different like pole beans, and so like we're gonna try to use the corn stalks to grow like for the trellis the beans, and I was just gonna grow them on the outside of the chicken run. And I'm like, well, they still like stick their dumb long necks like through the fence. And so I'm going to have to like keep it away. And then even still, I'm going to have it covered because, deer pass by and everything. Yeah. And so I'm trying to figure out like, okay, how can I do this where it's not a total pain in the ass? Just to grow food, in an area that it should just be easy to grow food. So
yeah, we have had trouble with deer too. That's been, a problem for us. I did find that putting nets over whatever I had planted did seem to keep the deer away. I don't know if there's just less deer recently or if they really were deterred by that. I guess we'll find out. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm sold on it, so I'm not going to stop. And I think the other thing too is see if I can get some plants that are maybe not as appealing to some of the predators out there too. Like I like to grow hot peppers, and maybe mix some of the hot peppers in with other things too.
There's a book I was skimming through last night about plant partners, I think is the title of the book, and it's like, plant these two together, and there's some for like disease, some for pests, some for there's like a couple different chapters or whatever in the book, and so depending on the pest, you might have a solution for like a companion plant or like a deer deterrent. So yeah, I could look at like you could look into that. And the other thing I tried last year was some of that little like it comes in like a 2-pound bag. It's like a gray powder that you sprinkle on your plants, and then you like get it wet a little bit.
Okay,
it's supposed to initiate when the deer smell it. It's supposed to initiate their fight or flight response, is what the bag says, and so like it doesn't harm them or whatever. It just kind of like freaks out their senses, and they like, oh, I don't want that. That's bad. But you have to apply it like every month or two. Is the issue? So
I'll have to look into that. There's a few products like that I've seen out there. I've never tried them, but if I get into trouble this year, I might have to give one of those a go.
Yeah. The other one I heard recently was having one hot strand of like electric fence, and when it's not on, you put tinfoil, like a little strip of tinfoil on it, and then have peanut butter on the tinfoil, and you go to turn it on, and when the deer go to lick or even just smell the peanut butter, whatever, it should like shock them and just send them running. Like, whoa, I don't like that. And you'd put it down low, probably
Right.
3-4 inches off the ground or something. But I heard that works. So
Yeah. Well, there's different methods. I'm always like a trial and error guy, I guess. And it's kind of funny.
yeah,
My wife and I do make a good team because she's very much a research oriented type person. And, so she'll be reading up on things, and, she'll have a stack of books like this looking into it. And I'll already be out in the yard and I'll try 12 different things. Well, this didn't work, that didn't work. Well, this worked though. So this is what we're going to do. And so we it's a good team that way. Just trying to figure out what works. Well, deaerate that plant. I guess we're not going to do that again. So
right. Yeah, that's funny. My wife and I are the same way. Like, I'll be like, well, I tried, these 5 things and number 6 worked or whatever. And she goes, well, I just looked at it like online and I could have told you that. Like, whatever. Yeah. Now I know why all those ones don't work. Mm-hmm. But so speaking of things that work, what things have you tried that worked well? Like, what are your successes that you've had?
It's hard to take credit for a lot of things. Like one of the big successes I think we've had is our little chicken flock. But you give them food, water, shelter, and you get back eggs. It's really hard to take credit for that. But the one thing I did mention before that I think did work well, that I think people might be interested in, was we tried a greenhouse. And, I was against it for the longest time. I don't want to put this thing in the middle of the yard and, this and that. And finally, my wife talked into it and said, okay, we'll try it. And I had low expectations. This is never going to work. But then, and we put it out there. We actually got a kit. I know a lot of people have designed and built them themselves, which sounds like fun. But the kit comes in a box. It's delivered to your doorstep, and you can put it up on a Saturday afternoon. So that's nice too. So yeah. we got one of the kits, and like I said, you threw it up on a Saturday afternoon, put some raised beds in there, and we'll see how this goes. And I tell you, we had fresh produce well into December.
Nice.
So that did work quite well. And the thing that I was really amazed about is, real winter came in January, and we had sub-zero temperatures and all that. And I just kind of looked. The snow was piled up around the greenhouse, and you'd see everything in there look pretty dead. So I'll go in there in the spring and I'll rip everything out and till it and all that good stuff. And it was a few weeks ago. I don't even know why. I just kind of looked in there and you saw these ratty looking plants, and I just sprayed the hose in there and watered them. And I came back 2 days later and they took again. So I thought, well, look at that. And so now it's March. I've already got lettuces and spinach and broccoli that, survived the winter, at least survived enough that once it, I don't know, how well it was, but I've had, it was fine. It tasted good, the spinach and everything. It just took a little bit of sun. Once the temperatures got back above freezing, a little bit of water, and it's so resilient. It came right back.
Nice. So, that's great.
So I would say, especially if you're in a northern climate, it's worth the investment. And it was, you can buy them right on Amazon. They're not that expensive, and they show up at your door. So yeah, you could build one too. It'd be a lot more fun to build your own, but sometimes hard to beat the convenience.
That's true. That is very true. So, what have you tried that failed or didn't work well?
Well, 2 things that came to mind. One was like we already talked about, was that some of the predation by deer and other pests, and just didn't protect the garden good enough. And I think I have a system now between the fence and the nets that I put over the garden. We've had luck with it so far. Again, was it because of the net, or was it another factor that I'm not considering? I don't know. I'm hoping it's the net. I'm going to keep doing it until it doesn't work. So that would be one thing. I'd be advising people, make sure you protect all your hard work and your investment there. And The other thing is really pay attention to your soil and where you're planting things. The first time I tried potatoes, I just dug a trench and, put some of the seed potatoes in there and backfilled it. And, we got some potatoes and we had good strong plants. But the thing is, I did notice that the soil was a little clayey. And, when you think about it, those tubers are trying to spread out. And if you got a dense clay soil, they're just not going to grow the way they would in a loose, easily draining soil. So we didn't get the yield that we should have. And then, so the next year, came back through and got rid of that unsuitable material and filled the trench back in with some compost and, mixed it together with some potting soil and stuff like that and mulched it. So it was more of a, more conducive to potato plants. And so, that'd be another suggestion I would have is really pay attention to your soil conditions.
That makes a lot of sense. I got a buddy not far from here who has super hard packed dirt. Like maybe the top 4 inches is you could consider soil, still very hard and compacted because it was all, crop, hay. So a tractor's been running over it for 100, 120 years. And so when we were trying to he bought like a gas powered auger to drill holes for fence posts.
Right.
And we started like a couple of them, and man, just both of us holding on to that thing, it would just it would be so difficult. We'd be
stuff like concrete,
It is. And, I'm only 150 pounds. He's probably the same. And so we're both just, trying to get down in this dirt and just, we're getting bucked off this auger essentially. But anyways, I had heard about getting daikon radish seeds. And so what you do is you just broadcast seed the daikon radish and just let it sit over winter or through the summer or whatever. And so they should grow I don't know, maybe that big around and up to 2 feet long, and just let them rot in place. And essentially, bam, you got a nice soft spot to plant for the next year. So
that's a good idea. I never heard of that. I'm gonna have to try that in a few spots in the backyard.
Yeah, I'll have to go over to his place and see how it turned out. If it's almost ready, the ground might still be frozen here, but yeah, I'll have to see how it turned out. Might fix clay issues.
Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest challenge in homesteading is that you faced?
Oh, for me, it's certainly time.
Time?
Because it's not and again, it's funny, you keep calling this homesteading. It's I'm not a real homestead, but it's between, I got the 9-to-5 job to pay the bills, and, I got a little company that I'm trying to get off the ground too. And then you've got family commitments and all these other things. It seems like I never spend the time that I really want to spend on some of the projects that I would like.
Absolutely.
And, it's I don't know if you know Josh Centers. He writes his Substacks. We've got some good stuff in it. And he did one a few weeks ago about planting, getting on a planting schedule, and for this crop, set the seeds on this day, and then transplant this day. And they had a whole graph and chart and all kinds of other stuff. And I don't do any of that. I've got this one Saturday afternoon that's free. Everything's going in the ground.
Sure.
That's the time I got. And I know that if I paid more attention to that, I could probably get better yield. But it's really just, you do the best you can with the time you got. We don't, I'm not a professional farmer. I've got, it's kind of a hobby thing for me, and I enjoy it. It is something I find very much enjoyable, but the time you have is the time you have, and you just do the best you can with it. And you try not to let it bother you. I did the best I could do.
Right. That's really why I started this, is because I was also struggling with the time. I'm like, man, if I just had one more person here to help me like finish these projects. Like half of them I've started, and I'm just like, I was telling my wife, I'm like, how many other people are in this same boat that they just need a dumb pair of hands to help them hold something, dig a hole, or plant trees or whatever. Like, let's just help people. Like that's way more satisfying anyways. Like, cool, I got some lettuce. Cool, we got some tomatoes. But you know what's really cool is helping other people do all that stuff.
Yeah,
I like that.
It is really cool what you guys do, helping out like that. You know,
Trying.
reading some of your bio and stuff like that. Yeah, I know it's been a tough stretch lately to do those sorts of things. But.
Yeah, next year hitting the road. But so anyways, what would you tell people that want to get started?
Oh, just do it. You know, like Nike says, just do it. I mean, you could come up. You could come up with 100 different reasons why. You know, I'll start when I get a bigger plot of land. I'll start when the job's not so busy, or I'll start next year, or I'll start when whatever name it. And if you're doing things like that, you're never going to do it. Just start with what you have. Do we have the ideal situation? No, absolutely not. It's like, but if we sat around the house saying, oh, when we get our 10-acre plot up in the mountains, then we're going to start, we'd never do it, Right. And if we ever did get that dream plot, you wouldn't know what to do once you got there, So it's, just go out and do it. We have our little thing that we have. We enjoy it. And we learned a lot along the way. If we ever do get fortunate and some are able to realize some of these dreams that, it's like I said, we've already started to overcome inertia. So we have an idea of what we might want to do. We have an idea of some things that work. We have an idea of what didn't work. Don't do that again. So, and you learn things along the way. So, and I don't care where you are. If it's something that you think you're interested in, there's something you can do. We have a friend who still lives in Brooklyn who grows sweet potatoes on his windowsill. I mean, if that's all you have the capacity to do,
I want to talk to that guy. I mean, seriously, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. You could do, if you put your mind to it, you'd really be amazed at what you can do. And, we kind of laugh and joke. It's like I said earlier, I know we don't get 10% of our calories produced in our backyard, but I also haven't tapped 10% of the backyard's potential yet either. So, some of these things like I was talking about earlier, like, why am I confining myself to just a garden space? I have this whole fence is a trellis. I got these other little fields I could plant too. So when you start to look at it that way, just go out and do it and build on what you've done. So, I mean, if you're that guy in the apartment who's got one sweet potato plant, next year do a sweet potato and a tomato, right? And you're eventually going to start building on what you have, and you'll look back on it, and trust me, you'll be happy you did. It really is a satisfying thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about your YouTube channel that you just made. Let's talk about that. Okay. So what's this Freebird Homestead, and it's also like a handyman?
That kind of, yeah. And, okay. There's always a debate. I mean, it's like, we talked a lot about homesteading and growing things too. And I've always, I've worked my entire career in the engineering and construction industry too. So, and that is a skill set that I have. And tying into like a lot of these other big picture ideas we have of wanting to build a community or build homes that are people can live in, to give them access to safe housing. Trying to bring all these different skills together and create something that can help people. And this ultimate vision we have is of producing either, whether it's, small homes on a plot that we have that people can move to, or whether we can go to, for example, that friend I mentioned who's currently living in a moldy basement. Maybe we can build a small, tiny home on her property, or something we can throw on a trailer, right? and bring down there. Or you see that there's a lot of demand these days for portable, housing. Tiny homes. People are always looking for trailers. I'll tell you what, you could have made a killing about 18 months ago when everybody was trying to escape from New York City. Something they could have hooked up to an SUV and just hightailed it out of there. You could have named your price for it. So we're trying to bring a lot of these different skills together, tying in, building a safe house for people that isn't infested with mold or some of these other modern building products that are going to, that are difficult for people with who've had reactions, severe toxic reactions.
Right.
So we can build those and then move them to a place where you can have a garden and almost like a little homestead, and just a place for people to heal. So that's kind of how this whole idea has come about. And, again, I've spent, like I said, a career in the engineering, structural engineering, construction industry. And even before that, growing up, my dad was an engineer, and he was always tinkering around the house. And I was very fortunate that way. What a great way to grow up. Every Saturday, he had a project he was doing. And, I was this tall. He bought me a little Fisher Price, whatever. It wasn't Fisher Price. It was actually real tools. They're just really small. And, I followed him around and, was hammered and, had a screwdriver and everything like that. And so I just kind of picked up some of the stuff. Now, I'm not a tradesman by any, stretch of the means, right? But I can play one on TV. So what I've noticed is that there's, these days with YouTube, if you want to learn how to do something, just go to YouTube. They have a video for everything. But a lot of the videos, some of them don't really answer the question that you wanted answered. I mean, for example, just the other day, I went to look up a video for how to do something. And, I watched a 60-minute video. I mean, 16 minutes, that's like a TV show, right? Where is it? I think a TV show is 22 minutes if you take out the commercials, right?
Right.
So I'm sitting there watching this thing, and, learned some information, and the guy was kind of entertaining to listen to. But he never showed how to do the thing that he said the video was going to do. And then at the end, you get to the end of the 16-minute video, it says, oh, here, go to my site and watch this 9-minute video. Where I go, no, I'm not going to do that. I want to do the thing. And so we came up with this idea of just short 2 to 5 minute videos that show people how to do basic things.
Sure.
And because that's another skill that we would like to foster in people. At least in my area of the country, you see a lot of people who are first-time homeowners. And I'm not blaming them. Like I said, I was lucky for the situation I grew up in, but maybe they didn't have a father, or maybe they took public transportation their entire life, so they've never driven a car. All right, so they don't know how to change the oil, right? Or you don't know, not that anybody can change an oil on a car these days; they're so tight. But it's things, or you've never changed a tire in your life. I mean, these are things people should know how to do, and we're trying to get. I think there's a niche out there for some videos. And again, there's always this debate, do you have to be a master craftsman to make a video, and maybe you shouldn't teach anybody until you've achieved level, whatever. I would kind of counter that. Well, everybody's a leader too. And, that might be something else I picked up in the military. I'm not talking to the guy who's a, 35th class electrician, right? That guy's not looking at a YouTube video for how to hook up an outlet either, right? I'm
hopefully not.
Hopefully not, right? I'm like a level 2, not up here, but I'm like a level 2 basic competent homeowner doing basic repairs. I'm talking to that guy who's on level 0, who doesn't even know what to do. And so thought there's some very simple direct videos could be useful for that, that demographic where, we're not getting into, the outlet was invented in 1904. And, when I hook up a 20 amp circuit, I use 12 gauge. No. That's for something else. Here, black wire goes on the brass screw, white wire goes on the silver screw, green ground slapping in the wall. That's what you got to do. All right. And just trying to get some very short, direct videos to show people things that they might not otherwise think they can do. And because I'm sure you don't, like you said, you travel around, you do a lot of things. It sounds intimidating at first until you've done it once. And then actually, that wasn't that hard. That was actually kind of easy. Soldering a pipe. It might look scary. If you've never held a blowtorch before or anything like that, this is, I'm not going to do that. But then you do it, you're like, well, that was easy.
Yeah.
And it might look a little sloppy or ratty, but it holds water. And so these are things that I think everybody should be able to do. And it does, to me, get into that concept of resiliency.
Oh yeah.
It's not growing food, but it's a skill that I think everybody should have. And so that's another thing we're trying to do, is we're trying to tie a lot of these different skills together: building and growing and producing food. And to me, those are all linked together as part of a resilient community. And then incorporating the knowledge that we've gained along the way about safe housing for people who do have some of these conditions. That is kind of the long answer to your question of what some of these videos are doing. So I think we shot 12 videos, I think, for just some basic things. We've completed all filming and we're in post-production now. I just like saying that. Basically what it is, my brother-in-law came up and we spent the Saturday afternoon just doing stuff around the house. And he's editing the videos now. But it's so we're going to try to, every couple of weeks get another one up or so. And it was fun doing it. Mostly it was just scrap stuff I had lying around the basement and the garage. I mean, got a few things at the local hardware store. I didn't even know what we were doing at first. We're like, oh, let's do this, let's do that, let's do it. Let's frame out a wall, let's slap a piece of drywall on it, and we did all that. And by the time we were done, we had basically something close to a model bathroom. We had there's obviously a mock-up, but we showed how to install plumbing and how to install electric, and we tiled the floor and we had the everything done. So it was again, I think tying into this idea that we have building resilient communities and just the building aspect of it, the growing food aspect of it, and bringing all those skills together.
I will have to watch and see and critique your electrical abilities.
I can't wait for the comments, because I am sure I'm going to get comments of, that's not the way you do it. You're stupid. You do it this way. I spent my life around construction sites, so I already know what I'm getting into.
Sure. So which way do you have the outlet? Do you have the ground on the bottom or the ground on the top?
I always put the ground on the bottom, is usually where I put it.
There you go. All right. I won't send you hate mail or anything. For some reason, east of the Mississippi, they run it the other way. They run it they run the ground facing up. And I think I heard the argument, because I was like, why is that? And the argument, your thumb, when you go to plug something in and out or whatever, may or may not be touching the ground. So then you're already grounded. I'm like, well, how dumb are you? That you're plugging something, you're touching the prongs when you're trying to plug it. It doesn't make any sense.
No, I've honestly never seen that. I'm going to have to look for that now.
Old houses, and maybe it's more like the southeast. Will have the grounds in the up position. It's weird. I don't like it.
I'd be confused if I saw that, to be honest with you.
That doesn't look right.
Yeah, my house is 100-year-old, and half the outlets aren't grounded anyway. And it was one of the first things I had to do when I moved in, was pull all the new wire and ground everything out. But it was.
I was going to ask. It probably doesn't even have ground wire in the box, but.
No, I was scared of that when I first got in. Some of them I did have to rewire, but a lot of it was the old, just blanked out on it, the VX cable with the metal sheathing.
Oh, okay, yep.
So that, it was 2-wire cable, but it did have the ground carried and actually the sheathing.
Yeah, the sheathing acts as the ground. But what another way you could get away with it is GFI receptacle everything, and that would take care of it also. But we are getting off on a tangent. That's okay. So the other thing you're starting, at least that you told me about, was remote tutoring. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. That is, another thing. Again, to me, these are all related subjects. Is
life skills. Yeah.
life skills, and you've got to teach people these things. And again, with the understanding that students need teachers too, and not everybody is possibly in a position to be a teacher. And if it's again, with a lot of things that have happened in the past couple of years, there's a lot of more people are interested in homeschooling, or with a lot of students working remotely, maybe parents don't feel that their students are particularly getting the attention that they need or deserve. And if you had a kid that had an interest or an aptitude in I guess I call them, the trendy term now is the STEM subjects, the science, technology, engineering, and math. You know, maybe you didn't have the means to instruct somebody in that way. And that could be anything from like maybe you're a parent doing homeschooling, and maybe math just wasn't your thing, and that's fine. It's not everybody's thing. There's certain subjects, languages weren't my thing either. And maybe you're not too comfortable with teaching math, and that's something remotely. With all the technology these days, that's something that could be done remotely if somebody was interested in that. Or if you were, had a kid who was maybe interested in becoming an engineer, you could talk to them about, here's what engineers actually do, or you could, maybe give an age-appropriate overview of, here's what a structural engineer does, here's what a hydraulic engineer does, here's what an environmental or a mechanical engineer does, and maybe get them interested or excited in some things almost as an extracurricular activity. If a kid's got an interest in mechanics, this is a pulley, this is a lever, and here are some little experiments that you could do with them, or you could build your own simple machines. Or if a kid had an interest in possibly being like a structural engineer or something like that, which is my area. Here are some little building projects, and here's like if you wanted to build a chicken coop or what have you. Here are some concepts or principles of building structures. Very, again, age appropriate. We're not going to be running through the calculus with 8-year-olds, but 8-year-olds can appreciate that certain shapes are stronger than other shapes, and why are houses and roofs always triangular, or even why are some structures domed, right? And you can learn some of these principles of physics that are actually kind of intuitive, and you might not even know it until somebody points it out to you. And so, if that was something, if there was an interest in, and it might be something that appealed to homesteading type folks who were maybe didn't have access to, maybe the kids are being homeschooled or something like that, and try to come up with interesting or exciting things they could do around the house to kind of learn some of these math or these science skills, which a lot of people might disagree with me. I think math and science are great skills to have. Although a lot of people kind of don't like math. It's a 4-letter word to some people, but
right.
So that was something I was looking at offering remotely if people were interested.
That sounds like that guy on YouTube, Smarter Every Day. He's got a couple of interesting kind of videos, a little bit like that. I was thinking, you could, I don't know, do like your little brief 2 to 5 minute videos in, the shapes and structure and like structural integrity of shapes and whatever. You make it very brief, because I think his videos are a little bit longer, but I'm not sure. I've only seen a handful of them. I'm like, oh, that was interesting. And then I never watched another one ever again, but it could be brief just to give people like a little taste of like what it is. You could tutor them in, teach them in, their kids in. So
I think you said it there, and it kind of ties into some of the other videos that we were doing for some of the handyman stuff. I mean, I think longer than 5 minutes. I mean, to me, I'm not going to watch a video that's longer than 5 minutes. I want to know how to do the thing.
Very rare.
Whether that thing is like we talked about, hooking up an outlet, or whether it's, I don't know, whatever, Newton's second law, right? You can boil these things down to 2 minutes. Somebody's going to take something away from that. And that's all it really needs to be.
Yeah. So let's talk about where people can find you. I've got more questions after the show, but let's tell people where they can find you. And I'll have links for this in the show notes.
Okay. Probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is on Twitter at Freebird Home. Just DM me about any of these things that you might be interested in. And then, as you mentioned, we did recently start the YouTube channel, Freebird Homestead. Those would probably be the easiest ways to contact to get a hold of me.
Great. I will have your Twitter and your YouTube in the show notes. So, and everyone else, you can follow Farm Hop Life pretty much everywhere. I'll also have links in the show notes for our show. Thanks for listening, and thank you for being here.
No, I really appreciate coming on and giving me a chance to talk about some of the things we're doing.
I loved it.